Hi, welcome back. So today we're going to have a look at Catullus poem 8. If you watched the Catullus poem 5 video, you'll remember that Catullus seems to be courting a wealthy married woman, potentially. We believe the woman was named Clodia Metella, but in his poetry he refers to her as Lesbia. It's a pseudonym based on the island of Lesbos, where the poetess Sappho lived and wrote hundreds and hundreds of years before Catullus. But Catullus is quite indebted to Greek originals, and we'll start to see some Greek patterns coming up in his poems as we go. Today, if we read this biographically, the relationship seems to have taken a little bit of a turn. So let's have a look at Catullus poem 8. We'll go through the Latin, the English, and the stylistic effects that you need for the exam. Miser Catulle, desinas in neptire, et quod vides perisse perditum ducas. Forcere quondam candidi tibi soles, cum ventitabas quo puella ducebat. Amata nobis quantum amabitur nulla. Miser Catulle, poor Catullus. So miser, like miserable. Desinas ineptire, stop being a fool, stop being inept. So inept is a word that we also use in English, meaning like to be not very good at something. Vides, what you see, you know that from the language paper. What else do we know from the language paper? Let's have a look. Candidi. So the idea that the sun shone brightly. We actually had a lot of solar imagery in the last poem, so we'll look at that with effects. Soles, like the sun shining. Ducebat was leading. So your girl led. Puella ducebat. You know that from the language paper. Cum ventitabas is when you used to go. That's not super familiar from the language paper, but we can work it out if we've got the second half. Amata nobis, loved by me more than any girl ever will be loved. Oh gosh, right, okay. Here it's interesting because amata nobis is first person plural. So in the translation they've put loved by me, but actually it's like loved by us. So it's almost like the poet is talking to himself as though he's two people, like he's his rational mind and he's the Catullus, the wretched Catullus who's in love as well. And you don't really get that in the translation. So by me is actually by us. He's talking to himself as though he's got a kind of split personality here. Amabitur nulla, will be loved. Amabitur is future, it is passive, it is vocab that you know. Okay. Ibi, illa multa cum iocosa fiebant, quae tu volebas, nec puella nolebat. Fulsere vere candidi tibi soles. Then, when so many enjoyable things were happening, which you wanted and she didn't refuse, truly the sun shone brightly for you. So again, we've got some repetition, candidi tibi soles, like the sun shone brightly for you. And we talked about in the Poem 5 video, the endless night that the couple had to endure, sun's rising and setting, and now here he seems to be isolated and alone. So a key theme for poem 8 is unrequited love, love that seems to not be reciprocated by the other person. Okay. Quae tu volebas, which you wanted, nec puella nolebat, nor did the girl refuse. Volo I want, nolo I do not want. Vocab you know from the language paper. Okay. Nunc iam illa non vult, tu quoque impotens noli, nec quae fugit sectare, nec miser vive, sed obstinatamente perfer, obdura. So, but now she doesn't want that anymore. So you, since you can't help it, must stop wanting it too. Don't chase a girl who runs away, nor live a sad life, but keep going with a firm mind and be strong. Okay. So let's have a look for vocab, you know. Illa non vult, she does not want. Impotens, like you who can't help it, you who are powerless. Impotens here just means powerless, I guess. Nolly, you do not want. So you must stop wanting. Fugit sectare is to flee or to follow a girl who's running away. So fugare, you know. Sequor, sectare here, sequor is one of the deponents, means I follow. So revise your deponents if you don't know sequor. Nec miser vive, don't live a sad life. So don't live miserable. All vocab you know. The key word here to revise for your lit paper is obdura. Like he tells himself to be strong, and we have that command coming up again. Vale puella, iam Catullus obdurat, nec te requiret nec rogabit in vitam, ad tu dolebis cum rogaberis nulla. So here he changes his address from himself, Vale puella, goodbye girl. Okay. Obdura is repeated again, so the idea that he's going to be strong. Requiret rogabit, to look for you or to ask for you. They're both in the future tense. If you weren't comfortable with requiret being a future tense verb, remember that third and fourth conjugation future tenses do not have bo, bis and bit. So go and revise the future tense for your language paper if that annoys you. Rogabit, he will not ask. And it's interesting that he talks about himself in the third person. So it's kind of like he's having an out-of-body moment when he's writing this poem. At tu dolebis, but it's you who will suffer. Oh, it's getting nasty now. Cum rogaberis nulla, when you are not asked at all. So when no one's asking you out, what are you going to do then? And then it takes a real turn. Scelesta vaite, quae tibi manet vita, quis nunc te adibit, qui videberis bella, quem nunc amibis, quius esse diceris quem basiabis, qui labeam mordibis, a tu, Catulle, destinatus obdura. Right. Lots of rhetorical questions and vocabulary, you know. So Scelesta is wicked one, or evil woman. We have to use two words in Latin. The A on Scelesta tells us that this is feminine. Vitae is a last for you. Mana, like remains, you know that. Tibi, to you. Vita, life. What life is left for you? Quis nunc te adibit. Adibit is a compound verb from ire. Ad ire is to go towards. So here, adibit, future tense, who will approach, who will come towards you. So again, if you're not happy with ire, it's compounded loads of times. Ad ire, ex ire. So go and revise those. Qui videberis bella, to whom will you seem beautiful. Videberis is from videor. It's kind of deponent. We translate it as to seem with an M instead of to be seen. So to whom will you seem beautiful? Who are you going to love now? Quem nunc amabis, so amare, you know from the language paper. Dicaris, to call, you know from the language paper. Basiabis, who will you kiss? And again, these are all future tense. Qui labea mordebis, so mordebis is to like nibble or to bite. It gives us the English word morsel. And this is where he seems to lose control a bit, which I'll talk more about with style. Destinatus obdura, remain firm, remain strong. So vocab you don't know, but Catullus is quite good for exams because he does repeat himself a lot, so the vocab goes a long way. So I have not read this in the meter. The meter here is quite interesting. It is limping iambus. So it's iambic trimeter with a spondy at the end. So it doesn't have a regular rhythm all the way through. So you have short, short, long, 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 long, long. So it's got that kind of slow limping line. If you're not super comfortable scanning a line for the meter, remember limping iambus is called limping because it makes the poet sound wounded. It reflects the content of the poem. And so even if you're not confident saying, oh, that's fallen on a spondy or that's fallen on an iamb, like that's an A-level problem, to be honest. If you can remember that limping iambus reflects the wounded nature of the poet, that's cool. That'll gain you marks. So if we have a look at some of the effects. Miser Catulle, self-apostrophe. I would memorise that for a 15 marker, to be honest. That he speaks to himself in poem 8. It's a really good reason to read these poems as autobiographical. He named Lesbia in poem 5, but he didn't name himself. Here Catullus refers to himself. Here we actually have proper chiasmos. Vides perisse perditum ducas. A, B, B, A. Okay, so he's reflecting that in inversion, like lose what you see you are losing. We've got a proper chiasmus. There is mentioned like an extended chiasmus across these lines. I've described it as epistrophe because we have TB soles and TB soles. To you alone, to you alone. So the sun shone for you and the sun shone for you, the middle and the end. It's quite disordered, like the repetition gives the impression that he's going back and forth in his mind about things. But it also links back to the solar imagery in poem 5, suns rise and set, in quite a natural order. Here there's quite a bit of repetition. We've got some inversion. Amata nobis quantum amabitur nulla, loved by me the way that no other girl will be loved. So we've got an inversion of past and future. Like it shows that he's at a bit of a turning point. And they point out here, ibi ira multa cum cosa fieban. So there's like a skipping meter, which reflects the fact that the past that he talks about was a happier time. So we've gone from limping to skipping in the way that the meter's positioned. We've also got parallelism. So volebas nec nollebat. So wanting and not wanting. You could also say here, because we've got nec nollebat, not wanting, it's litotes. So which you wanted, nor did she not want. If you wanted to read into this that he's dating a married woman, you could say that she didn't refuse him. He's kind of suggesting that although he's being aired out now and she doesn't want to be with him, she was quite happy to be with him then. So the litotes have a particular effect here where they're like, well, you didn't not want to go out with me, did you? So it's kind of putting a bit of blame and a bit of responsibility back on her. Okay. Nunc jam illa non vult, tu quoque impotens noli. So we've got epistrophe again. So we've got the clauses ending in non-vult, doesn't want, nolly, to not want. So they're in different forms, but they are the same verb. So non-vult is all one verb. It's nolly, and it just changes in different tenses from one word to two. At the beginning of the clauses, we have anaphora, neck, neither nor. Obdura, imperative, has underline emphasis. When we get it the second time, it's epistrophe because the lines are ending in the same way. Vale puella, direct address to her. He talks about himself in the third person, Jam Catullus. We have anaphora again, necte requiret, terrible pronunciation, necte requiret, nec rogabit. So neither nor. And again, it's very emphatic. Think about the repetition in poem 8 compared to the repetition in poem 5 when it was all about having all of those kisses, and there was that big list. And we had lots of repetitive effects piled together. We have the same thing here, but in a negative way. So you could say it's kind of an inversion of poem 5. Like poem 5's really positive and poem 8 is very, very negative, but it uses repetition in quite a similar way. Rogabit, rogaberis. So we have a bit of repetition and inversion, like he will not ask you for anything, but how will you cope when you're not asked by anyone? Endline emphasis on nulla, as in like not at all. So he's speaking in like quite absolute terms that no one's going to take an interest in her. And this is when he does get quite nasty. So this is where the poem shifts and he starts to really attack her. We have a number of rhetorical questions. It is again very repetitive. If we just say it's repetitive, we're not likely to pick up that many marks here because it's so overly like emphatic that you need to kind of think about how it's repetitive in different ways. So scalesta, name calling, the feminine ending means we don't need two words. Frontline emphasis, scalesta is the first word in the line. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rhetorical questions. But what's interesting is variatio. So variatio is just variation. It literally gives us the word variation. And it's because the rhetorical questions begin with different questioning words. So quae, quis, qui, quem, quios, quem, qui. By having them be different each time, it kind of emphasizes the fact that there's so many of them. There are so many questions to ask. Like, what's left to you now? Like, he will come to you now. He will call you. To whom will you see beautiful? Because qui is in the dative. Whom will you love now? So it's really, really emphatic by having these different question words each time. And it's all in the future tense. So it's like, what next, what now? So it's a shift from past to present to future. And the shift in tenses in the poem is quite interesting. Like, it was happy, it's now sad, what are you going to do? And it becomes really negative in the future tense. We have some repeated vocabulary from poem 5. We have Basiabis. And what's interesting is the way that it becomes a little bit more explicit before wrapping up. So the kind of really cringe phrase in this poem to look at with teachers is qui labea mordebis. So whose lip will you nibble, or whose lip will you bite? And that's where it becomes more kind of intimate and sexualized. And that's the point where Catullus brings himself back and is like, but Catullus, don't worry about that. So we have ring composition with the beginning of the poem where he says, Catulle destinatus obdura, like Catullus remain firm. And it's kind of like he's let himself reminisce about kissing her, and then he needs to kind of wake himself up and bring himself back. So the way he describes the kisses is like a climax of all those rhetorical questions. And it stops being about her not having a future with anyone else and starts being about him actually being a bit nostalgic about kissing her, which he banged on about loads and loads in poem 5. Again, don't phrase it like that in an exam. He calls himself back though, and we have the ring composition in this poem because it's a breakup poem. You know, he's got to try to remove himself from his entanglement with this married woman. So if you were going to link this to the themes of love and marriage in a 15 marker, you've actually got a really good case to say that romantic relationships can be really tempestuous. Like, marriages that aren't based on romantic attachment seem, on the face of it from the sources, to be more positive because it's not down to how people feel, it's people fulfilling their duty. But we have to remember that that's shaped by the reasons these sources were written. Catullus's love poetry is a work of literature. They were collected, they were read by other people. It's not entirely private poetry, and so the devices, the playfulness, are part of it being a poem. Similarly, love poetry plays on key themes like rejection and heartbreak, and that's what makes it interesting to read. We wouldn't read a poem about a married couple just having a nice dinner. Like, we probably wouldn't read it. The epitaphs, however, kind of idealise a marriage because it's to commemorate someone who's passed away. So you're not going to necessarily say things about their private lives or anything intimate. So this type of sources really shape the way love and marriage is discussed. Okay, I hope that was helpful. I'll link resources in the description and I'll keep the playlist going. Good luck with your revision.